Ron has Rachmanis. He's going to blow the shofar.
Oh,
You should hear it better. Very good.
all right.
no offense, Rabbi, but
Yeah.
In the Army, they have an expression, stay in your lane.
That's right. Right.
keep your day job.
So first of all, the question had been raised. We have not built in schmooze time with this class. And we do have a lot of information to talk about. So I always set the Zoom up with the option that you could join the host. So if people want to get on and schmooze in a casual way, you're welcome to do that. Does anyone want to express an opinion about whether we should have a formal schmooze time check-in?
We could.
All right, I'm not hearing any big thing that's saying 6:30, 6:45 is the official check-in. So just know that you can always sign on early. That's how I set the Zoom up. And if you want to see a familiar face, feel free to do that. That said, other than little Levi,
Yes.
anyone else have any news of the moment to share? Okay, very good. So our Middah for the month this month is the Middah of Rachamim, compassion, from the Hebrew root Rechem, which is womb, which is a very, very interesting connection, at least in my mind. So, given that, we want to first have a review of practice. So for the last month, you have had an entire month to be focusing on your daily phrase, your journal, and your Kabbalah. So who can tell us how you have been doing with attentive listening? I'm attentively listening to hear what you have to say.
I kind of found that what my focus and my thoughts was about it was that it showed me how judgmental I am. Because I think if you're attentively listening, you shouldn't be listening to that voice in your head that's giving a running commentary on what's going on. And so I didn't do a lot of journaling, but I did do a little, and I found that everything I was writing about what was going on and trying to implement it, whatever, was all around trying to put judgment away. And I didn't realize when we did judgment, I didn't feel like it was super relevant. And now we're not doing it, and here it comes flying forward.
Yeah, that's so interesting, trying to listen with openness and not non-judgmental. I think that's huge. If you participated, any of you, in any of my Torah from COVID conversations, I did this Torah from COVID project with the Temple Chai community. And my very first Torah from COVID was more listening and less judgment. So I also conflated those two. And just today, Rabbi Chernow mentioned that she wants me tomorrow, one of our videographers who's doing things for the high holidays is doing a project on, my wish for next year is. And you took the words out of my mouth, Sue, that, my answer in my head is going to be more listening, less judgment. And the two really do go hand in hand. And as the political situation is igniting, I think it's especially relevant. And I do want to say that once we transition into compassion,
Mm.
me reading about compassion and trying to apoliticize that was a tremendous challenge. But I do want to keep this space free of judgment and free of political considerations. So I just want to put that out there, you know, even before we attack the topic of compassion as it were, that we are not going to go into the political realm and having compassion for those with whom we have political differences.
Mhm.
More listening, less judging. Definitely.
Well, I think when you're judging, it's about you. It's not, and you're not listening 100%. If you're listening 100% to what somebody else is saying, then hopefully you won't be judging. Because
Very well said.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So judging is about me and listening is about them.
Right.
I love that.
I'm taking another course.
Ah.
Get that little person off that's judging off of my shoulder. You don't belong there. Thank you. Then you just say to yourself, thank you for sharing. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
What phrase did anyone use for attentive listening?
Everybody's into this, aren't they?
Everyone's listening attentively. Yes, Matthew.
I modified the phrase "a time to listen" to say it is always time to listen.
Good one. It is always a time to listen. Excellent. How did that play out in your everyday life? Did you notice anything different?
Well, as Sue said, if I'm listening attentively, I'm not as judgmental. And having read the compassion part and trying to understand the other, it was difficult, but it was forcing myself in encounters, which are often on Zoom or on the phone or walking in the neighborhood, to make the effort to listen, to understand where the person is coming from and what they're really. It's not just the words, it's the body language, and it's also what's not said. Listening involves more than just hearing, it involves sight and understanding. And very often it's what's not said. William Scharer had in his book on the Third Reich, had a story about the Nazis took all the reporters to Belgium to show how they were all the troops, they were going to invade England. And everyone filed stories and he didn't file a story because it's what he didn't see. There were no barges or boats to cross the channel. And he listened to what they said, and he also saw it and realized this was all fake. There was no invasion coming because they didn't have any guns. And I remember studying that you listen for not only what's said, but the body language of what's not said.
Yeah, it's such a great point. It's so easy to just focus on what's there, and much, much harder to reflect and be conscious of what's not there. So it was fake news. It was an early example of fake news.
The line always was errors of commission versus errors of omission.
There you go.
I was once involved in editing a contract, and the other side went crazy because we had deleted something and they missed it in a 500-page document. And they gave us X, but we never said we wouldn't do Y. And it was an error. It was deliberate, actually. But the point is they didn't listen to what was being said. There are people said all along, look, we're going to do this, but we still want the ability to do the other thing.
It's interesting. One of the projects I worked on today is that Rabbi Cherno and Cantor Woolman and I had drafted what we called our bare bones service. What are the things that are the bare bones that we want to make sure we include? And now we're into the realm of what we're actually doing. And my job today was to reconcile those two, to look through the bare bones and see what we missed, exactly what you're saying, what was not there that we said we wanted to do, but we neglected to put into the final product, and to figure out the disconnect between those. So yeah, it's always really challenging to look at what's missed as opposed to just responding to what's there.
And my question is, and then is it my job to recommend to you what's missing? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I'll throw it out to the group. How would you answer Sheila's question?
If you recognize that there was something missing, how do you handle letting the person know that there was something missing?
Well, in my particular case, that's easy because I was specifically asked to do this. I didn't.
No, I know that.
Yeah, but it as a general practice, if you feel like someone is missing something, how do you respond? Hi, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm late. I apologize.
We're so glad you're here. We were a little
Yes.
concerned. Everything's okay?
I was worried.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm fine. I
Mothers, you got
apologize for being late.
a whole class full of Jewish mothers here. We're all concerned.
Not all.
And you missed the photo of Beth Isaac's new grandson.
Oh, no.
So I have a feeling she could be induced to share it.
Yeah, I think so.
You can. Sure. Here, it happens.
Mazel tov, Beth.
Thank
So
you.
we're talking about just in terms of review. Oh, there you go.
Oh,
Levi, Dave.
oh, how special and precious.
Is
Thank you for showing me.
attentive listening. Sue, anything to report about your experience with attentive listening?
Oh, attentive listening? I'm always working on it.
And
Constantly.
what does that look like in your life? What do you have to work on?
Well, as a counselor, that's something that I've always worked on to make better and better. And hopefully I've learned how to do it well. And, it's something that I've worked on for a long time, because I was a counselor for many, many years. So hopefully I've learned to do it well, and but I always continue to work on it.
What is something that you're still working on or have found that you've had to work on through the years?
Patience, especially now with COVID and being home a lot. Patience is something that I found that I've had to work on more. Being home more and
yeah, patience is a challenge in attentive listening because we do have a limit on how much we can pay attention. It's probably different for each of us. And I imagine most of you have had the experience that I have had of feeling like you know where the story is going. So it's hard to attentively listen because you don't want to let the other person unfold their conversation at their pace. You want to just jump to the conclusion. So
absolutely.
And as a counselor, I'm looking at a number of people on the screen who are counselors. That's an interesting question. How do you navigate that, particularly if somebody is paying you by the hour and they're going on and you feel like you know where it's going? How do you move them along without it feeling like you're not being attentive.
Mm,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Taylor?
And especially with COVID, when we are,
Sue, you froze up there for a moment.
you froze, Sue.
Sue Prouty. So going back to
Cells are-
Sheila's, going back to Sheila's
I don't,
original question, which was, how do you address the unsaid, and is it your job to intervene? And just, I'll respond to that, Sheila, from my own perspective, and I've said this before, that I feel like, you need to find out what is the other person's need in that moment. Are they looking for your help filling in the
Input.
blanks, or are they just wanting to unload and share their story?
Right.
So I would tread personally a little lightly with
Right.
that, and ask a gentle probing question to find out, what
Right.
is what's the nature of this conversation? Are they looking for advice and feedback, or
Right.
I wonder if you've thought about X, that is the missing element. But I would always preface it with a question to find out
Right.
if that kind of input and feedback
Right.
is being welcomed.
Okay. That's what I thought. I was just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
Yeah. So patience is challenging. I'll share a couple of stories from my life. Ron is circulating in the environment, but so one of the aspects of attentive listening that I have personally really worked on, I don't know if he's aware of it, we have a big disconnect in our household because he's up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And, so he does his whole thing and he reads the whole newspaper. So by the time I roll out of bed at 7:30 or later, he's processed hours worth of information and he's ready to engage. And if I'm looking at the newspaper, he's already digested it and has questions and comments. And, talk about patience. It's, all I want to do is put my head down and look at that newspaper, drink my coffee, and not particularly engaged. I think I told you that the kids, when I was raising a family, said to me, quote, "Do you love the newspaper more than you love us?"
Mm.
It's a struggle.
Whoa.
It's still
Whoa.
a struggle. And Ron knows that. He said that to me too. But, in this past month with the focus on attentive listening, I find now that if he is asking a question or making a comment, Matthew, you talked about the importance of body language. So just letting go of the paper, picking my eyes up and looking at him rather than at the newspaper, and consciously telling myself, I'm going to stop reading and start listening, has been incredibly helpful in that particular area. On the other hand, I recently started to ask him a question, and he was pretty sure he knew what I was asking him. And so he started to answer before I finished the question. And then I did just look at him and say, what question are you answering? It was not the question that I was about to ask, but I just bring it up because it's so easy to do. He knows me, made an assumption that this is where the question was going, and he could just jump to answer it. And could you let me just asking the question before you already answer something that I wasn't even asking? But Sue Sandys, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm Ron. I didn't used to do this, but now I'm up anytime between 4 and 4:45, virtually every morning. Very first thing I do when I get up is I come into the kitchen, I get something hot to drink, I sit down, and I read through CNN's website. And then I'm doing some work, and yeah, and Cliff, if he's not going to exercise in the morning, might get up at about 7:45. Well, by that time, I'm bursting with, oh my God, you should see the cutest thing was here, and oh my God. And I think, from a Ron or a Sue perspective, instead of putting the blame on you and Cliff for doing exactly the same thing, I mean, he just looks at me like, will you just shut up? Just on a bed. I can't even put 2 feet in front of you, a foot in front of you, and you're just full throttle. It's very difficult when your brain is going to pull back and realize somebody else's needs are different, because you're just so excited to share everything. And so I think it's important that Ron and I pay attention to what you and Cliff are doing, really probably more than what you and Cliff are doing is the main focus, because you just got up. And
Cliff, don't say a word.
Right.
Just nod and smile.
That's right.
Sounds good to me.
There you go.
How long have you two been married?
34 years in November.
Yeah, so we'll be 4 years in December, and I think that's a big difference there.
Yeah, but we're no further along after
But
34 years.
This dichotomy in sleep hasn't always been there.
No, it's
just
few
started.
years, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. She's been getting up earlier and earlier. Eventually, she's going to be getting up before I'm going to sleep. So.
Any final thoughts on attentive listening before we move into compassion?
Well, I think that one of the more helpful ways to listen attentively is to repeat what I understand as what the other was saying, and checking with them to see if that's what they meant or if I heard them correctly.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that paraphrasing is an important part of attentive listening.
Yes.
You might say that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you remember I gave you that, the floor exercise for when you're having a challenging conversation, you really need to structure it. And one of the guidelines for that kind of structured paraphrasing is you have to speak in sound bites, as it were. Two or three sentences. Let me state how I feel, 2 or 3 sentences, and then stop and give the other person an opportunity to digest it and spit it back out. Because, if you talk for 10 minutes and you raise 8 different points, it's very hard for somebody to go back and grasp the totality of what you're saying. So yeah, paraphrasing is a very important technique and part of attentive listening. Good reminder. Okay, so moving into compassion, I'd like to start with in the commentary, on the bottom of page 1 and moving into page 2, there's a really interesting story from the Talmud about a calf being led to slaughter. Did anybody notice that story?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Beth, from the Talmud Baba Batia. So what do you remember about that story?
Well, I had a problem with can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I had a problem with still killing the calf. If I recall, didn't the calf or someone went up to, I can't remember, did they go up to Moses or?
It's Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Judah the Prince, the codifier of the Mishnah. So a very, very significant personality. He sees a calf being led to slaughter and it's bleeding, Bleating, and he says something that is not compassionate.
It was kind of like, this is your purpose, or
exactly
moment, that's what you stand. And yeah, it was hard for me. That was very hard for me.
Right. And by the way, that's the Talmud tells the story for just that purpose, to emphasize your response that, you know, even though this rabbi is such a famous, revered figure, that in that moment he was not his best self, because precisely he did not demonstrate compassion. That yes, we don't live in a vegetarian paradise in the Garden of Eden like Adam and Eve did. We recognize that people are going to kill animals for food, but that doesn't mean that we kill the compassion within ourselves. And so that's the whole point of the story, is that he is reprimanded for that.
Yeah. I just want to say one thing that's a little interesting with that, with what you just said. When I went to France, when I lived in France for a while, I saw, you know, I used to love veal, and it was the first, and I guess I abstractly knew it was a baby calf, but I didn't really think about it until I went to this farm and saw the little areas the calves were kept in for like 6 weeks. And I mean, I stopped eating veal, but it just traumatized me forever.
Yeah.
So I thought that's a good time to share that.
Yeah, no, I don't eat veal myself for just that
I
reason.
don't either.
And there are those who argue that veal should not be kosher, even though the animal itself is a kosher animal, and even if it's killed kosher, that the way it is raised is so inhumane.
Yeah.
That you know, we do have, when we talk about compassion, we do have a significant principle of compassion for animals. One of the things that I found really interesting in this reading, and you know, we can and should talk about it, is there's a tension in the reading about Sa'ar Ba'alei Chayim, compassion for animals. Is the concern about hurting the animal, or is the concern of the halacha about hurting ourselves? That if we are not, that we need to develop the quality of compassion within ourselves. Like, what's the focus? Is it on not hurting the animal, or is it on developing compassion within ourselves? And you know, I think, you know, we can resolve that by saying it's not a dichotomy. It could easily be that both of those are important, but you know, as you read through the material, you'll see that different thinkers definitely put the emphasis in different places in that regard. So we saw that compassion is the first. By the way, those of you who did inner ladder, I just want to remind you, we have talked about compassion before. I went back and looked. So not everybody was in inner ladder, but for those who were, this is not your first go round with Rachamim. We're circling back to revisit it. So we discussed then that compassion is the very first of God's 13 attributes. in that moment in the Torah where Moses says, I want you to reveal your essence to me, and God says, you can't see my face and live, but put yourself in the cleft of this rock and I'll pass by you and reveal something of my essence to you. And God passes in front of Moses and says, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum, a compassionate God. So compassion is the very first quality that God attributes to God's own self. And, you know, the Midrash, we're reading Bereshit in Torah study, the Midrash depicts that when God was getting ready to create the world, God struggled with, do I create the world on the basis of justice or mercy, compassion? And if the world was created just on the basis of justice, then no human being would survive, because the minute we did something wrong, off with our heads, the world could not exist just on the basis of justice. On the other hand, if the world was formed just on the basis of compassion, the world could not exist, because we would all do whatever we wanted with no accountability, with no self-discipline. If we didn't like somebody, you know, we would burn down their house with them in it, and you know, there would be no justice, because it would be all compassion for us and our feelings. So the Midrash depicts it as hot and cold liquids poured into a clay vessel, that if you pour very cold or very hot in, the vessel will break. So that's how God is depicted creating the world, pouring the hot and the cold in together, the justice and the compassion, so that the world could endure. But compassion is the primary quality. If you think about those 13 attributes of God, El Rachum v'Chanun, compassionate and gracious, Erech Apayim, patient, full of chesed and truth, rewarding the good to the 1000th generation. And we only get to the justice part at the very end of the 13 attributes. So what we might consider the more positive, beautiful qualities are definitely given primacy, which says to me that if we like to say we are created in God's image, that means we have to give primacy to those qualities in our lives. You know, as we're thinking about compassion, we need to think about the micro and the macro levels. And I think that, you know, that's something for us to consider. And I know we've got Sue Sandy's an attorney who can speak to the importance of justice as a social foundation. But so in the world, in order for society to function, there has to be a system of justice.
I don't know how.
We just read the parsha of Shoftim. Starts off Shoftim v'Shotrim. You gotta have judges and law enforcement. It's the foundation. On the big societal level. In our personal relationships, it might be better, you know, all of these midot, we're trying to walk the middle path. In our personal relationships, it might be better for us to err on the side of compassion. So that's something just for us to think about and play with in this next month as we're experimenting with the Middah of compassion. So can anyone recollect what are some, there are various mitzvot that are supposed to train us. I don't know what that was. So there are some call spam, I'm sure. So, but we have to have compassion, right? These poor people who make those spam calls.
Oh,
You know, I mean, they're trying to earn a livelihood. How would you like it if that had to be your job to, you know, make hundreds of calls a day to people who don't want to hear from you, who hang up on you, and who berate you. So
But-
there's an example of a challenge to our compassion is how do you deal with the telemarketer when you call? Can you be compassionate in that moment? Sue.
So maybe I'm going to sound like a horrible person for asking this, but I'll ask it anyway.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I should have compassion for the person who just spam called your phone.
Right.
But I'm never going to talk to them. I mean, if I were to pick up the phone and talk to them, then I should show them respect as another human, you know. But if I'm not picking up the phone, like what possible benefit is there to me or anybody? Who cares what I think about of the spam caller?
Yeah, I think not picking up the phone is a great strategy. Sometimes you get sucked in and you pick up the phone. A lot of times it's a robocall, so you know that's easy. If it's a real person, personally, I will usually say something like, you know, I'm at work, I'm really busy, I can't talk now, but at least not to scream and yell and curse, which is what my poor daughter Jessie, when she was in college, her first job on campus, and it was the highest paying job because of course nobody wanted it, was to call alumni for donations. So I'm a little sensitive about, you know, that job because, you know, my daughter had that job of, you know, click, 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 click. You know, you want to learn to deal with rejection. That's a great way to do it. Felix.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in the spirit that one mitzvot can lead to another, you can feel that not answering the call is an act of compassion because you're not wasting that telemarketer's time. You're letting that telemarketer go on to the next call that might respond. And if you feel that favor actually that you're doing for that telemarketer, then you're in the space of compassion.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I said I wanted to try to keep politics out of this, but I will say I've gotten more than one phone call from somebody calling on behalf of a candidate that I support, but I'm not interested in having a phone conversation about it. And, you know, so my answer has been like, thank you for taking the time to make these calls. This person has my vote. You know, I don't have time to have a conversation about it now.
Right.
Click. But, you know, particularly in a situation where you're dealing with a volunteer.
Rabbi, you know Kanye didn't get on the, isn't.
Yeah.
I
I did hear.
But we can still write it in, right?
Yes.
I could write in Owen Robbins if I wanted.
Waste your vote. Vote for Kanye.
That's right.
Kanye's not voting for me.
So what are some of the mitzvot that were mentioned in our reading that help us to cultivate the quality of compassion other than being kind to telemarketers? Which somehow the text missed, but it's good it came up. If you look in the section on Rachamim, that doesn't have a label. Rachamim, compassion, page 1. What is this? How are we to develop this divine quality?
Yes, yes.
You see that? Open the soul and feel the other. That's a good phrase right there. You could put that on your sticky note on your bathroom mirror right now. Open the soul and feel the other. Felix, yeah.
I don't remember in which handout this
Okay.
was, but it really touched me deeply that one of the most important qualities of compassion is graciousness, which was defined in such a beautiful way for me and meant so much that to be kind and giving to someone who does not deserve it is the most gracious, compassionate act that you can perform. So it just heightened
Oh,
my
what is
consciousness
that?
about compassion, not being contingent upon, well, you're a good person or you deserve this or, anything positive like that, but just to give to someone who doesn't deserve it is, to me, mind-blowing.
I agree with you. I felt that so strongly from this reading, and that's what it was so hard for me as I was reading this to separate the reading from our current political situation, because I wanted to think of
Yes,
individuals for whom it's easy for me to have contempt, and yet the reading, exactly as you're saying, is pushing us. Yeah, compassion for somebody who's a sweet person. Okay, big deal. That's easy. We're now advanced Musar students. Now the challenge is to have compassion. I think the Tomer Devorer that we read said that the challenge is compassion towards those who do wrong, those with whom we disagree, and here was the precise quote, who do outright wicked things. Are we prepared to have compassion for people who do outright wicked things? So I muted everybody because there was kind of a little noise in somebody's background. So if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. But I want to go back to the specific question about mitzvot that help us to cultivate compassion. And one of those was to shoo the mother bird away before you take the eggs. There are only 2 mitzvot in the Torah for which we are promised long life. One of those is honoring your father and mother, and one is before you take the eggs, shoo the mother bird away. And those are the only 2 places that the Torah says, if you do that, you are promised that you will have a long life. So kind of interesting. What do those mitzvot have in common? And then the discussion was, so is that about compassion for the feelings of the mother bird, or is it about cultivating compassion within ourselves? And we saw 2 different perspectives on that. But if you look at this text that I'm looking at, as I said, it's I guess it's called the commentary. And Rachamim, compassion. So how are we to develop this divine quality? And here's some halachic guidance. There are many mitzvot whose purpose appears to be cultivating compassion. We are enjoined to visit the sick, to comfort the bereaved in their time of need, and then there's the sending the mother bird away. But visiting the sick and comforting the bereaved. These are mitzvot that I'm hoping we all have experience with. So what has been your experience? Have those, in fact, facilitated the cultivation of compassion for you? Yes, Owen. Yep.
We don't know that we need it all the time, and that the fact that we all will need it at some point in our lives. So the notion of developing compassion before you actually need it, by providing it willingly, giving it willingly to others, means developing an understanding of what another person is experiencing, what their loss is like.
So when you say that that we don't need it on the receiving end or the giving end?
That eventually we all will need that.
We'll need to be on the receiving end.
Right. In most cases.
So there's kind of a benefit to ourselves to cultivate compassion, because then we're building a community.
Correct.
Which compassion is of value. So it's like sort of we're putting money in the bank so that when we need to withdraw, there's some funds there.
That's one way. Yeah, I guess.
So it's in our self-interest to be compassionate.
I think it's in our self-interest to realize that we're humans, and that compassion, I mean, in the B'Tselem Elohim sense of things, developing compassion, if that's the first thing that God says about God's self, that's consistent with what we're supposed to be doing here. Because people aren't born with it. You have to learn it.
That is very true. We are not compassionate. Although, we talked about last time, I think that it's a continuum there. If you go into the preschool at Temple High, you will definitely find in the 1-year-old room that there are kids who are like, somebody else grabs a block out of their hand, and one kid is like mine and cries, and another kid will readily give it up. And there does seem to be a certain nature about that, and probably reinforced at home. But for most of us, compassion does not come naturally.
Right. So we need to learn that. And I'm coming back to what Felix was saying a moment ago, that the idea that, or I think you two were talking about the same thing, that there could be people who you actually detest, that you really do not like, do not respect, etc. But at various times in that person's life, they are in the same state of needing compassion that all of us are, or will be eventually. And it's not based on what you think of that person. It's not like somebody who's had a huge loss, you're absolved from being kind to them or being
right
towards them. That's a skill that you need to learn.
That goes back to Sheila's initial comment about judgment, that we are to extend compassion without judgment. And I think it's very parallel. The challenge of compassion for me is very parallel to kavod, honor. That it's easy to honor someone whom we judge to be honorable, and not so easy to judge, to show honor for the Tselem Elohim of someone that we judge as abhorrent. I wanted to read to you a quote from Soren Kierkegaard from a book called Works of Love. And Kierkegaard was, I think he was 19th century Danish Lutheran theologian, but big influence in my thinking. So he writes, one's neighbor is one's equal. One's neighbor is not the beloved for whom you have passionate preference, nor is, he's talking about love your neighbor, but I think it applies to be compassionate to your neighbor. Nor is your neighbor, if you are well-educated, the well-educated person with whom you have cultural equality, for with your neighbor you have before God the equality of humanity. Nor is your neighbor one who is of higher social status than you, that is, insofar as he is of higher social status, he is not your neighbor, for to love him because he is of higher status than you can very easily be preference, and to that extent, self-love. Nor is your neighbor one who is inferior to you, that is, insofar as he is inferior, he is not your neighbor. For to love one because he is inferior to you can very easily be partiality's condescension, and to that extent, self-love. No, to love one's neighbor means equality. It is encouraging in your relationship to people of distinction that in them you shall love your neighbor. If you do this, there is salvation, for you shall do it. Your neighbor is every man, for on the basis of distinctions, he is not your neighbor, nor on the basis of likeness to you as being different from other men. He is your neighbor on the basis of equality with you before God. But this equality absolutely every man has, and he has it absolutely. Let's see, Matthew looked up Kierkegaard for us. Early 1800s, there you go. I think I said 19th century. There you go. So he is your neighbor on the basis of equality with you before God, but this equality absolutely every man has, and he has it absolutely. So, I mean, that is really challenging. There are people in the world who do really horribly awful things, and one wonders, is there such a thing? Is there any action that someone can take by which they forfeit their right to our compassion? Is there any boundary, or are the Musar masters suggesting that our compassion is unlimited?
It gives them the power to make
Sorry.
you like that.
I'm thinking of where person
Beth's connection is not strong. Beth, your connection is not so good. Do you want to type in the chat what it is, or can you move closer to your router?
frozen.
She's like, no, she's frozen up. I'm not catching what she's saying.
Computer.
So I mean, you know, let's be blunt. Can we vote Hitler off the island, or are we supposed to be compassionate to Adolf Hitler?
Off the island.
And the reason is that he caused many to sin.
So who was it who said, you know, one murder is a tragedy, you know, 6 million is a statistic? So we have compassion for somebody who murders one person.
Yes.
I'm going to be like Abraham arguing with God. So what if you murder 5 people? I should still be compassionate. What if you murder 10? What if you murder 100? Like where's the boundary where no compassion for you?
I think it has more to do with training others to become murderers rather than how many people you directly murder, how many murderers you create in the world.
And how many am I allowed before I lose my right to compassion?
I'm not good in math.
Me neither.
I don't think they're putting, I think they're saying it doesn't matter, that you have to have compassion. I mean, when they're saying, you know, picture them as a newborn nursing, you know, if that's how far back you have to go, then that's what you've got to do. I mean, I don't think I agree with it, but I think that's what they're saying.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm glad you brought us to that, because that, you know, that was a strong sense of the reading, that imagining the evildoer as an innocent child. And so, Sue, I hear you saying that does not move you necessarily towards compassion.
Nope.
But it takes this and makes compassion a one-way street, the way we're talking about it. The idea that we should feel compassion towards Hitler, but what does that do to our reaction to the people who have been harmed by Hitler or harmed by that murderer? The idea of somewhere in here, there is you can be compassionate towards the person, but still believe that they should be voted off the island.
So the reading clearly said that compassion doesn't mean forgiveness.
Right.
It doesn't mean exonerating bad behavior or being a victim. But it does mean, as Sue brought us to, like imagining a person at some point, they were an innocent child.
And that's fine. It's about difference between thought and action, or feeling and action.
So the other guide to help us connect with compassion more, one was the image of the innocent child. The other was what they refer to as the concept of zichut avot, the merit of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this person doesn't deserve compassion, but think about their ancestors, and maybe we grant them compassion based on the goodness of their forebears, which is why we start our prayers, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov. And the Midrash says that when Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, and then God stays his hand and says, don't kill him. Now I see how faithful and loyal you were, that you were willing to sacrifice your only son. And Abraham holds God accountable in that moment, says, in the future, my children, grandchildren, my descendants are going to sin against you. And I want you to remember this moment, and I want you to be compassionate towards my descendants on the basis of my behavior. So is that an argument that moves anyone? That, no. Cliff is saying no.
No, I can't go back and look at, your great grandparents or something and say they were, they lived a good life, so Hitler gets a pass. It wouldn't carry any weight. I'd still vote him off the island.
So it's complicated, and it's challenging. I think the good news is that in most of our everyday lives, we're not dealing with people who do outright wicked things, as the text suggests.
Wicked.
Hopefully in the next month we'll deal with more of the average wrongdoer and opportunities to express compassion.
Yeah,
But it's
no
still-
compassion from me.
What's that, Sue?
I said no compassion from me
For whom?
for Hitler or anyone like that. I'm thinking, but I can't do it.
But if we take it out of the Hitler realm and into just somebody who does wicked things, the idea
I can't do it either.
you could feel compassion, but that does not change a course of action that you also believe is right for dealing with that person.
So one of the questions that the reading poses is it sometimes compassionate to enforce boundaries? How can it?
Always compassionate. Don't enforce boundaries.
So what are examples of compassionate boundaries?
Just as a parent with your children.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. The reason the kids act out is they're looking for a grown-up to be in charge. The kid is scared and they push the limits, and because they don't know who's in charge, they'll do that, and it can do some terrible things as a way of saying, would somebody, some grown-up, please take over? And
And they're testing us to see if we will.
yeah,
The kids are testing us.
right.
That's a whole different thing, though.
Well, but Rabbi Coppell asked the question about, are there boundaries? And I think that setting boundaries is a way of saying to somebody, this is how the world stays safe. This is how we are able to respect each other, to have a community that we can rely on. And I think that compassion, in some ways, I hadn't thought of this before, calls on us to stretch the boundaries in one way or another for extenuating circumstances. You know, like, yeah, I knew your great-grandfather and he was terrific to me. So I'm going to give you a break here, but that doesn't change the boundary. You can't do this other thing. And I think that what I just said is that it may stretch the boundaries, but the goal of the boundaries is to keep everybody safe and to keep everybody, to respect everyone and make sure that compassion does not allow for bad behavior. Compassion does not allow for continuing bad behavior.
It's the role earlier you referred to of the balancing between justice, call it boundaries, and compassion. And when society agrees on certain facts, modes, and acceptable behavior, those boundaries become easier. But when people can't, I was listening to Rabbi Sachs's lecture at ASU today, and he said when people can't agree on what the truth is, then you don't have a common acceptance of justice and you start things falling apart. But compassion and boundaries is really justice, a common sense of justice and what's the common good.
So there's an element of compassion for the victim in the application of justice.
Right. Justice is supposed to be blind. It's not supposed to favor the one versus the other. It's supposed to hear everyone out. You have the Innocence Project. You have all these things now. They're saying justice was not blind. Where is the compassion for these people? You know, someone who commits one murder may get pardoned, but what do you do with the guy in LA who, the former policeman who was just, how many people did he kill? How many young women? You know, 10, 15 women, where is that drawing?
More like 80.
Yeah, like, there, you just cannot, it's so cross that line that your compassion is for the victims' families and all the young women who lived in fear for all those years.
So it makes me wonder if really what we're talking about is a blanket, that compassion is a blanket thing that is supposed to forgive and ignore the consequences of wicked bad behavior, or if compassion is really about understanding that that person who is about to face justice is going to be harmed in some way, imprisoned, executed, etc. And you could feel badly for them. You could say, gee, I'm really sorry for them. But it doesn't change the rationale of why the boundaries are there. The boundaries are part of how we maintain a civilized society, a family, a biker gang. It doesn't matter what the groups are, but that it's groups and relationships are based on boundaries and understanding when boundaries need to bend, but not break them.
Yeah, so,
Except for the biker gang.
But I'm listening to what you're saying, Owen, and it's making me think, if you have a father who molests his daughter and you're supposed to have compassion for him, maybe he was abused as a child and now he's acting it out as a grown-up. I mean, there could be 50,000 reasons or maybe none why he does what he does. And then you've got this 12-year-old girl who maybe got pregnant as a result of this incest, and your heart goes out to her, obviously, because she didn't ask for any of this. At what point does the perception of the victim, of your compassion for the perpetrator, isn't that being put aside by
No,
showing any compassion for a perpetrator?
you could feel it and say, gee, I feel badly that this guy's going to be in prison for the rest of his life, but he deserves that. He harmed somebody in a way that is irreparable. And that the real expression of compassion belongs to, in this case, the victim. It's not saying I feel really bad for your father who's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. I could feel that privately, but it's about having even a fleeting moment of compassion doesn't mean you absolve, you erase the boundary between.
It's not that there are no consequences.
Yes.
And I think in that particular example, the compassion also can go towards the perpetrator for whatever happened in his early life that led him to those choices and those paths. Doesn't mean he's not responsible for those choices, but we can have compassion for what he suffered as a young person.
Yeah, there's something wrong with him.
Yeah.
Mary, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, has anyone seen the movie Rewind? It's a story of Cantor Nathanson, Temple Emmanuel, and the sex abuse case where a man was abused as a child. Everyone in the family was abused. His kids were abused by their uncles, one of whom happened to be the cantor at Temple Emmanuel in New York at the time. And it was this story of a family, and the man who was the father became a well-known filmmaker, and he made a film about this horror, was asked, how could you have brought your brothers into the household all the time? And he said, I can't answer. I was abused, but I allowed my children to be abused. It's a very powerful, Sue, your question is like, you have to ask and understand and listen to where that person came from. But there's some things that cause, as Owen said, so much irreparable harm to another that it's hard to have any compassion for them.
So I want to take a few minutes. I had given you a couple of pages from this book, pages 109, 110, 111, and 12, I think. And also 117. So if you can locate them, they look like this. If the page starts off 7, Leader's Guide. Do you have that?
Is that the attachment with the Zoom information?
I sent it to you at some point. So anyway, on page 109, can you raise your hand if you have that document in front of you?
I don't have it.
I'm the only one. Okay, so I'll walk you through it then a little quicker. So these were some exercises that I had hoped to do that show us some different ways to respond with empathy or compassion. So here's an example. Someone at work says to you, I couldn't sleep until 3:00 a.m. last night thinking about our presentation today. So this morning I figured I'd better drink lots of coffee to keep me awake and alert, but now my head is killing me. Why do I always get hit with headaches when something important needs to be done? So then the exercise involved 4 different empathetic responses. I'll read you what the rubrics are, and then the answers. Just, hopefully you can identify the document and go back and look at it with your chavruta. But so a reply that demonstrates intellectual understanding of the situation, a reply that demonstrates sympathy, a reply that offers advice, and a reply that verbalizes empathy. So again, the situation is your coworker says they couldn't sleep. They were so worried about the presentation. So they drank a lot of coffee. Now they have a headache, and they're kind of in this self-pity mode of why me? So here's the intellectual response. It's probably because you have a lot of tension when you're anticipating something important, or maybe it's a combination of stress, lack of sleep, and the caffeine that's causing your headache. So just no emotion, just intellectually, I hear you and I understand. Next one is a sympathetic response. I really feel for you. It's about the worst thing to have a horrible headache when you're about to do an important presentation. So what that response has done is shift the focus back to me. I really feel for you. Okay, well, that's nice, but how does that help the person who is suffering? Third, an advice response. Why don't you take this ice pack and lie down for about 10 minutes? Okay, that might be helpful, but we don't know that the person was necessarily looking for advice. They were just stating how they felt. And now here's the empathetic response. Are you frustrated because you would really like to be feeling energetic, healthy, and clear-headed for this presentation? So what do you think about the 4 different responses? The intellectual, the sympathetic, the advice versus the empathetic.
If someone gave me the empathetic answer, which I don't think is very empathetic, I would feel attacked.
Really?
Yeah, I would take offense at it. Like, how dare you?
Are you feeling frustrated? You don't want somebody second guessing your feelings.
No, and by saying because you would want to be healthy and whatever is basically implying you really screwed up. So I would find that really upsetting.
Do you resonate more with one of the others?
I probably would have gone with sympathy. I probably would have said, oh yeah, that's a real bummer that you got such a bad headache. I probably would say something like, is there anything you want me to do?
How can I be helpful?
Yeah.
Anybody have a different response?
I responded to the 4th one, empathy.
That felt good to you.
Yeah.
Recognizing, gee, you wish it could be different. You're not,
Right.
You're not in the place that you would want to be.
Right.
It would be hard to be sympathetic in that circumstance. I would want to say, you did that to yourself. And it's the 8th time in a row you've done that.
All right, let's just try one more.
But that is being judgmental.
Who cares?
I'll just
Okay.
if you can
Just saying.
or I'll find it and I'll
There's a lot of compassion for you.
There you go.
you can play with it in your chavruta. Here's one more. Just let's see how this sounds. Adam, now you're at the meeting. At a meeting while you are in the middle of a sentence, someone turns to you and suddenly and says, don't you ever let someone else have a chance to talk?
Ooh.
Okay, now you're supposed to respond with empathy by sensing what the person might be observing, feeling and needing, or requesting. So here's the 3 possible responses. Are you referring to my going, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, when Peter pointed to the map? Are you feeling irritated because you want everyone to be heard? Would you like for us to go around and hear from everyone before I speak again?
The last one for me.
Sheila's all about empathy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm for the last one.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
Rather than that person feeling annoyed, give everybody else a chance to air what they have to say and then go on with your presentation.
Okay, good. So as I said, you can look at those answers, and then the other page that I gave you had to do with self-empathy.
Oh.
We have not focused much on, but on page 117 in the book, there are 3 statements that are identified as life alienating and ways that we could rephrase them that would be more compassionate to ourselves. So here's an example. If we think about another person, what an insensitive jerk.
Ooh.
Not the most compassionate response, and not expressing compassion towards ourselves in that situation. So here's the proposed better way of reflecting on it. Upset, I am just so upset to hear him talk to me in that way at a time when I feel vulnerable. I need compassion and I want to hear some caring words. I see Felix shaking his head. What are you thinking, Felix?
Unreal.
You just can't imagine responding that way.
I can imagine an angel responding.
So that's all right. I'll stop there with these, but I'll make sure I resend them. Let me make a note about that when I send it to you, so you can work on. It's the high holidays. We're aiming high right now. So, we are meeting again on October 1st. We're going to be talking about silence, but with 2 modules on silence, as you'll see in the curriculum. The silence that we're looking now is more related to gossip, lashon hara, holding our tongue. And then later in the year, we're going to look at more of silence from a perspective of contemplative silence. So the silence is broken into 2 different modules. But for the moment, we're all aiming high to have compassion, even in the most challenging situations, and even towards our poor belligerent selves. So I'm going to stop there so that we have time for our takeaways. Oh, and I did have a little final closing, something I wanted to read, but let's share some takeaways. What is it that you want to make sure you remember? Sheila and then Owen.
Well, going back to Hitler, which I have, going back to Hitler, I hate to do this, but having been in Nuremberg and seeing where everything took place, I have no compassion for him. I think he should have been gotten rid of way before that. And to walk down the streets on the cobblestones and to see the names of the Jewish people on the cobblestones, Rabbi, we did the same trip. I have no compassion for him. When I just kept saying to Bob, I don't understand. I mean, intellectually, or emotionally, I just don't understand. Just because we're Jewish, that's what I kept saying all the time. Just because we're Jewish, we're people like everybody else. So I had no compassion for him at all. If he was right here now and I had a gun right between the eyes.
All right. Owen.
That tells you how I feel.
I've been surprised this evening to have my definition of compassion change from intellectual concept of we should be open to the feelings of other people no matter what, to understanding it as a way that society functions. It's a fundamental part of society, and it has to do with a kindness about setting limits with forethought, kindness, awareness of other people, but the importance of the limits does not change. And that's a different view than I had before the call.
That's bringing up a little bit in my mind about Black Lives Matter and what's going on in our society right now. I know we don't want to talk politics, but when you're talking about Nuremberg and what's happening with the Jews, it's with what's happening in our country right now with compassion and the Black people feeling like that they're not being viewed the same and treated differently. Seems like we're looking at them through different lenses than how they're being looked upon. And it's hard to kind of reconcile the two different views just because they're Black.
Other final takeaway?
Can you hear me for a minute?
Debbie Rubin.
Am I being heard now?
Maybe we should all mute ourselves.
Yeah, we're just about done, but Debbie Rubin wanted to say something.
I have a quote. It's a little bit political, but compassion is not weakness, and concern for the unfortunate is not socialism. And that was by Hubert Humphrey.
Okay. Leave that. Very good. So, you know, the whole metaphor of the high holiday season is that we imagine God sitting on the throne of judgment. This is very much the time when we imagine that we judge the Unatana Toket prayer. We pass before God, one person at a time, to be judged. And we are trying to do our tshuva, to move God to get up off the seat of justice and to the seat of compassion. It's a perfect time for us to be studying this Middah. So we're trying to also get ourselves out of the place of judgment and into the place of compassion. I just want to, in your practice corner, there's a little meditation on page 2. I'm just going to wrap up by saying if you haven't read it already yet. So it goes like this. Think of someone who is close to you, who is likely to be in some form of pain today. Someone who is close to you, who is likely to be in some form of pain today. It could be physical or emotional pain. It could be sadness of loss or the anxiety of uncertainty. Illness, failure, abandonment, loneliness. There are innumerable sources of suffering. Once you have identified that person, close your eyes and visualize their experience from the inside. Depending on the source of their pain, bring that experience to life within you, in your own imagination. Take the time and make the effort to visualize the details of their situation, because the poignancy and the reality of another person's feelings often lie in the small things. Make your inner experience as vivid and intense as your mind will allow. And as you exercise your imagination in this way, let their pain become your pain. If you feel motivated by this experience to reach out to that person, don't hesitate. Taking caring action is the fruit and fulfillment of this practice. We must continually be nosei ba'ol, carrying the burden with our families, our coworkers, our communities, and with the whole of humanity if we are to continue to grow spiritually. So that is your challenge moving forward. I wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shana Tova. You know, we have Slichot services on Saturday night. Please join us at 7:30. And the High Holiday website has been launched. One of the reasons our friend Michael Loya is not here tonight is that he has been working non-stop to develop that website. So he's very generously given of his time. And holydays.tamachai.com, the one-stop shop. You can find every link, every program, every conversation, every teaching, every service. I would strongly encourage that you take some time now to look through the website because there is so much going on that you will want to look at the whole thing now so you can decide what your priorities are. I pretty much defy you to do it all. So with that, great to see everyone. And
Dude, don't go off.
Oh, okay.
you guys,
We're going to continue.
you guys can
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
God shalom. Tova, everybody.
Shana Tova, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Not Shabbat.
Uh-huh.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Honey shut her stuff off? No, not yet. Here we are. You and me, babe. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Did you read? I don't even know where she was talking about. Do you?
No.
I didn't have half the handouts, and I looked through all of her, you know.
I
her-
didn't either.
Okay.
I didn't either.
All right. Well, we have to meet for the next one because I feel like I'm behind the 8 ball. Do you?
Yes.
Okay. So, how are you?
Okay. I'm exhausted, and my granddaughter's coming tomorrow morning on her way to Tucson and for lunch, and I have to go wash my hair now and take a shower. And I'm just wiped out.
Why? What else? What did you do? Why are you so tired?
I was running around today looking for bar stools, and I'm just wiped out.
Oh God.
Just so tired.
I understand. I'm tired too. Look what
Yeah.
I look like. I've no makeup on.
I don't
Ugh. Oy. I can't stand it. All right. Well, what were you doing? What were you doing on Mari's with Mari yesterday?
Oh, it was a rabbi circle thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're one of the machas. You're one of the big machas there.
Oh yeah, right.
I like your hair short, by the way.
Thank you.
Are you enjoying it?
Yes, it's a lot easier for me.
Does Craig like it?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
I couldn't stand mine anymore. I chopped it all off yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yes. It was just doing its own thing, and it wasn't
Well,
curling.
when it gets too long,
Well, mine wasn't curling. It was. I mean, my hair is so curly. It was the whole thing was flopping. Well, you can't see it anyway, but
no, it's hard to tell.
yeah. All right. Well,
All right, we'll make sure we make a date and,
Yes, let's do that. But
Okay.
go take care of what you have to take care of. I
Okay.
love you. Say hi to Craig.
love you too. Say hi to Bob. How's he
I
doing?
will.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, sweetie. And we'll make a date for sure.
Okay.
All
Shabbat
right.
shalom. Bye.
Shabbat shalom. Bye-bye, sweetie.
Bye, sweetie. Leave the meeting.